Hello again, my name is Chloe Bruce. I worked for some years as a natural gas journalist. I was also an academic specialising in the politics of Russian natural gas, and this was in the early new millennium when I was carrying out these researches. I've also covered the business environment, particularly in Russia and the former Soviet bloc. And I've been making many YouTube videos now for over a month, discussing how I was diagnosed with schizophrenia in the context of hysteria and stigma about mental health when I was in my late 20s, many years ago now, and how this has bred hate, a sort of hate environment, including libelous notes with racial slants and falsified accusations, completely preposterous accusations, including suggestions, which I've discussed, particularly in my first and second videos that I've made, how I was someone who ate my own excrement after defecating my kitchen sink. And I cannot take this out of the context of, although I'm a Christian, I cannot take this out of a context of a maternal line that's Slavic Jewish, in British, but Slavic Jewish in a hereditary situation. And I've been discussing also London in the context of this mental health stigma, how it deflects from the terrible housing policies, historically and present, of the governments of Britain. And also I've been discussing how I myself was homeless. I had to leave the country whilst working as a journalist, because it was a very bad quality of life. The rents were astronomical, and I've discussed how later, when I finally became too ill to continue working, I was homeless and placed not in a flat or a council flat, but I was homeless in a B&B for the homeless for 11 months. And how I've described how this B&B is a complete myth. It's actually a house share with tiny rooms for one family. I myself do not have children. I've discussed these issues because a lot to do with the medications I was on, but not finding the right person, of course, my own lifestyle, and also the fact that a few years after being diagnosed with schizophrenia, I had the additional diagnosis of epilepsy after suffering a grand mal seizure while I was doing my researches in Vienna, at Vienna University, in my early 30s. So this is what I've been discussing, a lot to do with the British property market and how high the house prices are. But it's not just that you can't buy, you can't rent, especially in London, owing to extremely high prices and a so-called lack of availability. I've also discussed misogyny in Britain and a kind of feature of Britain life where discuss a kind of in-man who sort of rushes around with consultancy jobs, insulting women in a misogynistic manner with links to Whitehall, that is the central government. And I sort of call it here a kind of no man is an island in Britain, but a woman is. I've discussed how an MI6, a military intelligence 6 report, described how women still have lower salaries than men. And this is because they are not put in senior positions or given promotions in the way the male species is here in Britain. And this is obviously extremely painful given how high the homes are, because they'd have to hole up either with a difficult family member or a partner that was relatively unwanted but useful in terms of their property. However cynical that sounds, it's very difficult to imagine yourself that impoverished, and a partner can help improve the wealth of someone. But as I say, the women are not just given lower salaries. As I have had discussed, I was actually ousted. They accused me of being a flirt and ousted me from the office by flirting with me and that way around, inviting me out in a way I couldn't cope. So I had to change jobs after being constructively dismissed in that manner. I've never been sacked, luckily, from a job, and except once very briefly in Israel when I was working in a bar. He didn't want to work there anymore after a few weeks, but that's one thing. But for my journalistic jobs, academic work and travel agency work in Moscow, I have not been sacked, and I've never had a complaint brought to me about any article I've written, thankfully. Anyway, so I've discussed these issues and how a woman is isolated and atomised in society, because even if she has a good job, she's actually so busy maybe that she can't really understand how a family, in my case, would work out with the housing crisis and low salaries. It'd be very difficult. We do manage. I didn't. I found I had very long hours and lots of overseas travel and ungrateful bosses. Anyway, So I've discussed this, and today I've been discussing the National Health Service, the NHS in Britain, and there's lots of media reports, chronic media reports about how underfunded it is and how it's in a crisis, how it might close. God help us. But I've discussed rogue nurses and doctors even, and these falsified notes, and how they create problems for women and the sexual abuse of women in healthcare. And I'm going to just talk a bit more about technical problems, because I said how insecure the medical notes are. Everyone just finds out everything. They even tip off your family about your mental health conditions. And people without legal qualifications working in the council can hear all about you, as in my case, schizophrenia and the seizures I was suffering. And that's obviously extremely painful. And I know from my own family, having a social worker mother and a child psychiatrist father, that they don't keep confidences at all, and they're quite rude and insulting. I know one child psychiatrist who moaned about having too few interesting patients and that kind of thing. And his hospital was threatened with closure at one point, and he'd storm into him going, "My teeth are rotting in my face," because he couldn't cope with the closure of the hospital he was working in. I now realise there might be some weird kind of castration anxiety. Anyway, I've discussed these medical practitioners and social services in earlier videos. I'll try and put links to some of these videos in the description. So that's one thing. Anyway, so I've discussed how insecure these medical notes are, including, I've discussed, a whole fake medical website and a complaints process that leads to yet more hurt and insults by less than qualified people. For example, those at the Parliamentary Ombudsman, who may not even have a degree according to themselves. And I've also talked a bit about kangaroo courts and how the UK courts and legal system is in disarray. This has allowed a type of kangaroo court to appear, and if the media reports are correct, Boris Johnson, the former Prime Minister, himself said he was in a kangaroo court. And it's no fun. From my own experiences, I don't find it fun at all to be accused and tried without a court. Anyway, I'll show you. This is the website of my general practitioner that was left. This is meant to be an NHS website. I'll do this as best I can. This was an NHS website. And they've actually advertised a Harley Street clinic that was linked to my father, a child psychiatrist. It's just advertised as hospitals, things like an fMRI scan. It doesn't offer really an appointment with a GP. And I tried to complain about this, only to have them transection me when I complained. Anyway, it's gone now to a website that's apparently better, but I'm still worried about it. I still have concerns. It's extremely difficult to deal with technophobe receptionists wearing the trousers because they're jealous of their dad. And meanwhile, I'm also getting the knocks on the door from the council because they want to oust me from my flat and make up preposterous allegations to get me out. And you'll see how this is literally a fact in my previous videos. And they're still sending healthcare providers and mysterious male tradesmen to my door uninvited. I'm having to fend off people at the door. And I've discussed how properties, this level of property hype is encouraging fraud. People are just desperate to get a flat, imagining they're worth $500,000. Even this flat, they're imagining it's worth hundreds and hundreds of thousands of pounds. And as such, the blame game, also present between UK MPs, the members of Parliament, mean that genuine issues like fraud, this website, are severely neglected. And you'll see the point here. I've been trying to complain about these websites and the lack of security of the NHS system, including the NHS app, and which contains your some of your medical notes, your conditions, weight, and other things. I've been trying to complain that this is an inherently insecure system, only to be insulted yet again that I'm somehow in the wrong, and yet more exhausting questions. I can't deal with I want someone who can literally fix it myself. And now I went for ages trying to say how difficult this app was and the NHS system, and now we have news that it's the responsibility of Russian cyber criminals. But it's clearly them allowing them in by having such an insecure system. You'll see what I mean. The problem is that even in its current state, even an ignoramus can gain access in some capacity through various channels to your medical records. For example, when you set up an NHS app as an NHS user with an NHS number, that is the National Health Service number, to set it up you have to get some passkeys. And when I looked at the description of the passkeys, they said, whatever you do, get it by phone and not in person. But my GP practice insisted I came and got it in person. They had it right in front of me, handed it to me. And the consequence is now I have no NHS app. I can't get back into it ever again. It's too insecure that everyone can see these passes. There are people with their phones in surgery. And this means that someone can literally be in my records and be that person in my records. We have COVID jab fraud and maybe some health migrants, health immigration, where they're desperate to get their medical system, their medical conditions treated in the British NHS system, and is extremely insecure. I don't know who, who could get into my notes and imagine at the very least that they could be me, the person in the health system. You'll see what I mean. If you take a look at it, you'll see it's extremely insecure, and it's encouraging a lot of aspiration of people thinking that they can get someone's medical details. And it so happens when it comes to government websites that you have an account with, like the Housing Authority here in Wandsworth, or this NHS app, people lock you out. They lock you out by trying your password. And I'm now locked out of all my accounts only to be told I have a dodgy memory and can't remember my password, which is provably incorrect. They should look to see if that's the issue in a credible, experienced and trained manner when it comes to computers. Yes, and I've already discussed, this is linked, how the government describes the mentally ill as SMI, and this is meant to stand for severely mentally ill. We're meant to be so incapable we can't even wipe our own bottoms or go to the lavatory normally. And this I've discussed is an irresponsible way of describing the mentally ill as SMI, not only because it means journalist, a member of the mass media in the Russian language, and we know the history of Slavic and particularly Slavic Jewish journalists in wars. Not only does it mean that, it would be a vast amount of money if this social care programme was actually dealing with that number of the population. It'd be 1 in 4 people, 25% of people at any one time might need their bottoms wiped in some ghastly manner. And they still have it up on the government website, this description of me as someone who basically doesn't function in the way someone who, for example, sadly might have senile dementia, or a dementia, let's say. They have completely got their wires crossed. They're so busy in the government also, and in what I've called the Munchausen media, making diagnoses of people as having grave mental health conditions, that they fail to create coherent and structured policies. And as I say, there's a blame game. You have one MP, all they do is sort of trade insults, and it's often accusing one another of racism. Can't they see that hate crimes are against the law, and they have to actually rely on the law to prosecute that person? They can't just hurl insults without disturbing and upsetting the public. It's very serious to have a racist politician. They should actually consider their words carefully and say we are confident that justice will be brought against this person if they have the evidence there. You can't just have these kangaroo courts also in Parliament. And I have said in previous videos how this Munchausen ministry, this kind of people sort of taking it upon themselves in the government to actually talk about health as though they know anything about it, are using not just the NHS, in the context of these sort of NHS woes, this Munchausen ministry that crosses all the parties, is there not just to deflect criticism away from COVID policies by discussing adult social care all the time, but also their terrible housing policies, with a literally rubbish take on it by the new Chancellor of the Exchequer, the Labour Chancellor of the Exchequer, Rachel Reeves, whose comments are just not technically correct. I mean, she's not analysing it technically. She's given the most lacklustre introduction to her take on housing that I've ever heard, if it's to be believed in the media. It's sort of, yes, build more houses, but she's got to get to some of the root cause. She has to talk technically about how that will work, how many, what the timeline, what the budget is, and why they weren't there in the first place. For I've already discussed how they still sell housing, council houses, if they're still selling, for example, this flat I'm allowed to buy, but where am I meant to get the £300,000 sterling to get it, having been unemployed and unwell for years? They have to discuss why they build new houses, they're still selling council houses or properties. And I've already discussed this. An example of this is the Deputy Prime Minister, Rachel Reeves, who has grabbed a council property for herself years ago, and she's got a hard lock story linked to it, but she has no idea how to then house apparently other people. You can't sell off housing and then say build more. We'll be flooded by cheap housing if that goes on, all bought up or something with nowhere to live for the vulnerable or ill. And I do not fully understand, this seems like I'm on a tangent somewhat, and sort of am, the recent outage affecting computers worldwide and the so-called blue screen of death. I don't technically understand it that well. 1 minute they were saying, oh, it might be a Microsoft error, and then they're saying it's not, it's a different company or something associated with a dodgy update. But I'm wondering, what came first, the chicken or the egg? Where was the problem originally? Why did it, well, it was a dodgy update, yes, but what was wrong with the computers that were affected by this also? I'm not anything to do with IT or computers. I'm just saying I don't fully understand. It was just one dodgy update. I know that AI will be extremely smart in spotting fools. It seems to be viral software. 1 minute they were saying if it found a virus, it will cause a problem for those computers. I don't really know. It's a chicken or the egg situation, something to do with Micro, something to do with this other company. I can't remember the name offhand. But anyway, I know one of the British news channels, I think it was Sky, had a blue screen of death also at one point when I was watching it briefly. But anyway, I can say the UK computer systems are in any case vulnerable, not just the cyber hackers, but they have to be quick off the mark with this kind of situation also, because I've long thought that we're vulnerable with our software because it's either used inappropriately, so something to just say a media complaint to Ofcom. They've got a bizarre website, and I think they all these government institutes seem to have an old programming language, like a go-to page, and they keep sort of it's as though they keep, instead of doing anything manual, they keep default to a sort of lazy go-to page that says no to everyone, and we're not going to continue with the complaint. I'm not the best, I don't know much programming at all, I've never studied it, but I did teach myself programming when I was 8 on a Sinclair ZX Spectrum. I couldn't save my programs, but I do know a go-to page is a too simple solution to widespread fraud and issues concerning medical malpractice. I'm sure it must be a default position that they've taken, and it's hardly going to save money. So yes, a few days after your computer, you carefully fill an online report. You might, if you're lucky, get yes, we'll investigate, and a few days or a few weeks later, it's no. So this sounds petty, but given how none of these computer processes work when it comes to complaining or logging complaints, I do hope, actually, however petty it sounds, that these petty bureaucrats have a completely dead computer. And I can say that I have had less spam since the Blue Death, because I'm aware that people have the only people who have my details of that degree are government institutes. This sounds odd, but as you remember, I'm a natural gas journalist by profession, with a speciality of Russian language and literature and politics. And however odd this sounds, I can see a sort of link between the Blue Death and the blue fuel. I've commented on that is natural gas. This is because, although it might not be anything to do with any computer incompetence on part of people, it might just be one of those things with this update. If they've neglected Russia's cyber hacking, for example, then that kind of attitude is going to lead to complacency about money and an ignorance about what's going on in society, because anyone turning a blind eye will be over time more and more ignorant about what's going on. And this is a disaster when it comes to governments, past or present, and their the institutes they're supposed to govern. This, you'll see it at home. The housing hysterics, these housing hysterics, I've talked about them, and these vast amounts that property is supposed to go up, are so busy turning a London street into a sort of Gasse, as the Germans would say. It's their word for alley. And I call it this Gasse because they're so excited to have property. This word gas with the word gas in it is linked to their excitement about Putin and his money. All they ever do is go on about Putin as a villain and his money. And I've discussed how it simply cannot be that he's the recipient of the gas profits from Russia. He's the sole recipient in the way they describe. He can't personally profit from that because it's not in his. He might have some shares, let's speculate, in gas companies, but it's literally not just him running the gas industry. It's run by gas specialists also, and he was a lawyer, Putin. And they're saying in one program that Putin will, on news program, that Putin is profiting by these sort of dodgy LNG sales, liquefied natural gas sales to Europe. And I've commented that in earlier videos. And they see Putin making so much money out of gas in their mind, imagined or real, that I think they're imagining vast profits coming their way from gas to fund their crumbling house in Westminster. This gas is a sort of link to the gas attitude they have when it comes to the gas giant Gazprom of Russia. It's a gigantic gas-producing nation. It's got gigantic amounts of stuff, but it's not that easy to sell worldwide because of the nature and structure of the transport modes. It's different to oil and that way, and I mean natural gas. And I should like to point out that even academics, when I was doing my PhD on Russian gas politics, I was looking carefully at other articles to see if other people were following my line of inquiry. And I look at an article saying Gazprom, let's say bullying Gazprom as the headline, and they talk one brief mention of what's actually gas, in that sense natural gas, which is Gazprom's, Russia's company Gazprom's industry. But they go on to talk about petrol and oil instead. It wouldn't be that type of gas. I'm talking about natural gas. And vast some of these articles seem to be about natural gas, when in fact they're talking about oil products, and it's a very different thing. You'll see what I mean if you look into it. They might have now gone, these articles, but I think they're still making that mistake, mixing one type of gas with natural gas. Yes, so I think that they're expecting a mysterious gas donor themselves to be as rich as the gas technicians of Russia, to spare them the agony of a crumbling property. Somehow they get money, and I think they are thinking about gas. It's not an easy way to get money, and if Putin can do it, it's obvious that others are going to think, well, I can do it. It doesn't work like that. If they make a grab for Russian gas assets, it won't be Putin on the Ritz. It'll be shooting on the Ritz, quite literally, owing to this extreme regime complacency. They can't make a grab for another country's gas. I'm not saying that's exactly it, but it is if they actually take away Russian gas and put in other providers. And that's what I'm saying. It's a bold comment maybe, but not from my position. Russia was the cheapest and best gas supplier for Europe. And if they take in more expensive gas from other people, having trashed the Russian regime, they can expect at least a question mark over their motivations for hating Russia the extent they seem to, both in these Munchausen ministries and in a type of Munchausen media. I hope this makes sense. If you watch my video, I'll try and put relevant links in the description. It is difficult maybe to see what I mean in all its aspects. There is a link towards between the NHS crisis, oddly enough, and international insecurity, because regime complacency is obviously going to be a pretext for others to seize an opportunity. Thank you for listening.